Hi, everyone. Welcome to Retail Reset, a curated virtual forum of content and conversations designed to help retailers map out the road to recovery and beyond. I'm Debbie House, Executive Director of Content for Retail Touchpoints, and today I'm joined by Bobby Stevens, who's a principal at Deloitte, and also Chuck Reynolds, who's a senior manager at Deloitte. Welcome to both of you.
Hey, Debbie.
Thank you for having us.
No problem at all. So today, Bobby and Chuck are going to share a presentation. They're going to talk through how digital commerce is evolving, including some new personas that are emerging, and they'll also share some insights into some of Deloitte's recent industry research. After the presentation, we can follow up with a couple of questions. So with that, I'm going to turn the presentation over to you guys, and Chuck, I think you're going to share your screen.
Yeah, thank you very much.
All right. So as Debbie mentioned, we are going to talk a little bit about digital, and the title's a little foreboding, but digital in the age of COVID-19, it's something that we do all need to be aware of. And, different states and different subsectors are in sort of different phases, if you will, of recovery, responding, and even in some, rare cases, kind of getting back to a new version of normal. But we do want to kind of walk through our research, some perspectives on that we hope will both answer some questions and then raise some new questions for you. So, Chuck, if you want to go ahead and jump forward. First, we want to start with just a basic definition of digital commerce. And, this has evolved over time. But when you talk about retail and consumer, really digital commerce is sort of a range of ways of engaging, selling to, and talking to the consumer. So, of course, obvious things like, an e-commerce site for a particular retailer or their mobile app to order, food or order groceries directly from someone is included here. But there's also other ways to kind of invoke digital commerce, things like marketplace, things like, selling your products on other people's websites. So it's not just kind of direct consumer e-commerce. There are other sort of partnership and marketplace models that we think are important to consider and have actually elevated in importance within COVID-19 because of the ability to move very quickly on some of those channels. So we'll talk a little bit more about those, but we just wanted to set the stage that we weren't just talking about, your own website. We're talking about the broader kind of ecosystem of digital commerce. Go ahead. And it's never been more relevant. I hit on this just a second ago. Relevant to consumers, but also relevant to companies. So number one, and this is part of the data that we were looking at, and then a lot of others have seen this, e-commerce right in the sort of early part of April reached over 40% of US retail spend. What's incredible about that is typically we're running somewhere between 14 to 18%, depending on what numbers you believe. That spikes up a little bit around the holidays with gift giving and then pops right back down generally to that number, maybe a slight growth each year. But the fact that it's up at 40, 44, 45% and has kind of stayed around there for a while is really remarkable. The other place that this is really increases in online grocery. So you can sort of see versus last year, we're talking about a year-over-year growth of 60%. And many of these consumers are trying it for the first time. So that we think there will be a bit of a knock-on effect of people trying it for the first time, realizing it's better than they thought, and at the very least, keeping it in their rotation. It may not still be their main method of stocking up on groceries and filling the pantry and the fridge, but if I miss something, if I've got to get something quickly, I'm now way more comfortable as a consumer doing this. And sort of leads to the last point on the left, which is, nearly half of consumers are stating, and this is very recently, that they're okay spending more for convenience. So that's things like home delivery, same day, that's membership fees for access to free delivery. Time has always been money, but I think that's never more true than it has been today. So, I think it's really important to note those kind of market and consumer forces as you think about how you can act as a company who plays in the space. So thinking about time in a different way. So we're talking about getting things to market in weeks, not months or quarters or years anymore. You need to be able to react and be more agile. Being able to access digital talent, whether it's sitting within your own team or quick access with partners or other digital talent agencies that can help you do this quickly. it's really just important to think about the same things that maybe the consumers are: speed to market, ability to flex quickly as needs change. And this becomes really, really important as we think about digital commerce raising in importance. And it's really important to think about that. Also, that it's not as hard to be fast anymore. There are a lot of partner opportunities. We talked about sort of the spectrum of digital commerce, where you can start with just last mile delivery and kind of ease your way towards full direct to consumer, or you can pick a spot along on the continuum to kind of jump into this that is relevant and appropriate for your particular business, the products that you sell, the markets that you operate in, and the consumers who you are trying to serve. So go ahead, Chuck. So let's talk a little bit more about some of those trends that I mentioned. So as we look at this e-commerce sales growth, it had been sort of ticking along at, frankly, a slightly downward trend. And that was mostly because of just the size, right? As it gets bigger, it gets harder every year to grow at, double-digit percentages. But it was, sort of chugging along at the 13 to 15, depending on the year, % year-over-year growth. And you saw that even last year in 2019. Well, when we got to May and April of this year, we were seeing it up 68% over last year. So, that's 3-4 times what it normally would be. And COVID has completely kind of reinvigorated that digital sales growth, probably not for great reasons, more out of need and necessity than anything, but it still shows that there is, when needed, there's the ability to scale there. And if you look at the right side, you will see that, absolutely obvious sort of split where you go from, 20-25% of online to up to 40% almost immediately and holding for a while. It'll be interesting as more data comes out for May and June to see, where it settles back into. But, if you were to take bets, probably the high 30s seem like a reasonable expectation, which is quite a bit higher than it normally would be. Go ahead to the next slide, Jack. And, as part of that, we're shifting to mobile. More than ever, I think mobile is becoming a key portion of this. It's getting up to 45% of digital sales. And in some places like food and QSRs, it's 60, 70, 80% of their digital revenue. The mobile app is really a place where people are engaging in the most frictionless behavior for digital commerce, and it's growing 6 times faster than other channels. The flip side to that is, at least at the moment, there's still some of the key metrics have a little way to go to catch up to kind of tried and true desktop e-commerce. So you look at conversion rate, you look at average order value, at the moment those are still a little bit lower, which is one of the reasons why as we move to digital commerce, we still have to figure out the sort of mobile puzzle to really unlock all of the value. We flip over a little bit to the consumer. And I think this is a really important thing. You can't really talk about this without thinking about the consumer. Most are starting to feel a little safer leaving their home. You look at this is only about 3 weeks apart. So late April into mid to late May. And you can see an uptick, at least in younger cohorts, that they're feeling a little more safe leaving. And we've now witnessed this in reality in the last few weeks. In certain areas where we're seeing, more people out and about. I would say, the older cohort still being a little bit, and probably rightly so, safe and conservative about their sentiment about going out. And, if we look at this, it's just interesting to see that normal sort of everyday behaviors, which used to be thought of as completely benign, immediately shifted to being somewhat risky and are slowly moving back towards feeling more comfortable. And this plays itself out in a variety of ways, which we'll hit here in a second. One of the ways this is playing out is in some new personas that are emerging. So I think this is pretty fascinating, where you're seeing a near majority in some cases, at least half of consumers talking about 3 types of behaviors. One is stockpiling. This was extremely prevalent at the very start of the outbreak here in the US, where people didn't really know what to expect. So they sort of just started stockpiling certain things without knowing if they'd need it or not. Well, it's come down a little bit, but that's still happening in certain areas. Convenience has been sort of steadily there the whole time. And as you're, staying at home or staying close to home and not going to the office and sort of, managing work and life and all these things together, convenience is something that's really important, and people are willing to spend a little bit more for it. What we thought was fascinating is as things started to loosen up a little bit, the old consumer habits also started to come out around bargain hunting. So how do I find the great deal, especially on something I don't need? I'm starting to think I might be willing to buy that again. And that's an interesting one element of sort of consumer behavior that may start to come back, whether that's driven by a desire to return to normalcy, or it's driven by, frankly, economic constraints that many consumers are feeling. It's hard for us to tell, but it is interesting that we're seeing a shift a little away from stockpiling and back towards kind of good old-fashioned bargain hunting. And finally, we took a category that we thought was an interesting category to take a look at, because it's not one that necessarily got talked about a lot, because a lot of these stores, frankly, were closed in the early part of the pandemic, but the apparel category. And this is fascinating to me because, as people start to think about spending more on apparel as things open up, and I mean, heck, they have to leave the house now, so they might want a couple of new shirts or new pairs of pants or something, or a new pair of shoes to leave the house. You see that, across the board, people are thinking about shopping online. So, almost 50%, no matter the cohort, for me to shop for apparel, that's way up in terms of intent in the past. In-store down around a third or below a third, and even mixed, which is sort of the omni-channel behavior. So if you mix omni-channel and online, you're talking about, 3/4 roughly of consumers at any age range saying that that's how they're planning to shop in the coming months for, a category which, generally speaking, is thought of as more of an in-store category. So digital is accelerating. Consumers are either via need or now they're liking it, indicating both with their wallets and with go forward sentiment that it will continue to be an extremely important portion of their lives. So the only thing that we want to caution is, despite all this market opportunity and the consumer demand, it's still a little tough to be profitable digital alone. Couple reasons for that. Number one, ad spend is continuing to kind of increase and be a little bit more expensive, and that's because a lot of ad spend is going to digital. And this is sort of a weird way to say it, but digital ad spend is only down by 33%, whereas non-digital ad spend is down by almost 40%. You remember, in the face of uncertainty and a downturn, ad spend is one of the first things to usually go. So the fact that digital ad spend is holding on a little tighter than non-digital, and the base is smaller, it's really important to know that. And as that happens, it'll get a little more expensive. The other piece is shipping. Shipping continues to be a big portion of the cost, whether that's ground, whether that's air, whether that's last mile sort of delivery through, ride sharing or other services. There's a cost associated with that. And as that goes up, and if you don't have enough margin built into your baskets, it can really eat away at it relatively quickly. So something to consider, especially for those who have thinner margins as they move in heavily into digital, to figure out ways to continue to bolster that basket with items that have the right margin profile or the right low cost options for shipping that will make sense.
Yeah, and thanks, Bobby. I think, that's a really good setup when you think about, digital commerce and where and how you want to enter into this space. That obviously consumers want it. There's a market, there's the technology that exists, but you really need to kind of think about 5 key areas as you enter into or grow your exposure on digital commerce and your effort into that sales channel. One is what is the role that you would like it to play? Very few players in the retail and consumer product space really are fully digital enabled. Digital is a kind of could supplement existing consumer needs, drive growth, reduce your overall cost to serve by perhaps replacing some stores or what have you. But you have to really understand what are your objectives with digital commerce and how you want it to play into your entire ecosystem. And I think too, as Bobby alluded to it, is, for digital commerce in the space that you as retailers sit in, as we sit in, who are the consumers that we want to go after, right? What is their purchasing behavior? The purchasing behavior, as Bobby alluded to, historically for apparel has been thought to be in store. It's obviously, we understand that consumers are now much more interested in, ordering online. How does that manifest, and how do these behaviors that we're seeing emerge in terms of grocery, where will that continue, or other fast-moving consumer goods? So really think about kind of the purchasing behavior and the values upon which your consumers have, and how you need to interact with that. The third is around your product mix. As thinking about your assortment, thinking about it in terms of the store, what you put on your web storefront matters, just as much. And, it also would need to play into who are the consumers that you believe are most likely to shop digitally, and what's the assortment that's going to really drive to them, and what are their values, and what is your role of the channel? Is it to attract new consumers or increase depth of engagement with existing consumers? Should be some things where you really think about what are the product set that you build on. And as Bobby alluded to at the onset, when we think about digital commerce in a much more broad sense, from marketplaces, social commerce, direct to consumer, who and where can you leverage the ecosystem available to you in order to accelerate your path toward execution? Where can you partner with a last mile delivery, partner with a third party to manage your platform, and enable and lean on their expertise in areas on digital commerce that allows you to focus on core of being, consumer centric, or defining that mix or understanding there. And then the last piece is really to think about the, profitability structure. How are you going to really structure and organize yourself and your organization in order to drive profitable growth in digital commerce? And as Bobby alluded to, there is a broad spectrum of digital commerce. On the left-hand side of the screen, where we really think about, these are, partnerships that you can engage with in order to get products to market quickly by, using retailers and their digital experiences. Have a little bit lower engagement with the actual brand, but enable that engagement and that quick to sale. And leveraging others, technology platforms and marketplaces and traffic. Same thing with the last mile delivery in terms of, enabling that convenience as thinking about your product mix, what the consumer is that you're targeting and how you want them to be there. Are there eyeballs on DoorDash's website already? Are there eyeballs on Uber Eats, that consumers that you can dive into? And then as you get closer into, kind of having a higher consumer interaction and that consumer data, which is important in any digital commerce, is the marketplaces. How can you get your products to those marketplaces and fulfill those in a way that is efficient, effective, and profitable for you? And then finally, kind of the last on the spectrum is a fully owned direct-to-consumer view. This is, what a lot of people think about from digital commerce. Obviously, we believe there's a lot more to it, but a number of new entrants into the space in categories that we wouldn't have expected are emerging in this time of COVID, and particularly in some categories that we wouldn't have expected, like alcohol or consumer products, CPG type companies. So in order to deliver all of these kind of digital commerce piece, you need to understand that there's a set of capabilities that are foundational in order to enable this. And all of these capabilities don't necessarily need to be owned by you as a retailer, but you need to think about them and understand where you're going to leverage these capabilities across the entire shopping journey, from pre-shop, shopping, post-shop, and then also ongoing measurement, as this is not a kind of set it and forget it type of experience across any of those spectrums of digital commerce. So, when thinking about really how are we going to get the right consumers to the site, and that such that we can fulfill the value proposition we promise. what's that experience that they're going to need in order to really feel confident in their purchase and their purchase price? How is the site merchandised? Where and how are we going to assort this in order to make sure that our entire breadth of products are enabled and visible? The technology platform, where and how are we going to transact across, and enable that purchase behavior, and supply chain and customer service in terms of fulfilling, and then making sure that customer service isn't just an afterthought, but is really enablement to close that sale or create the consumer engagement. And really thinking about where are these points of interaction and how can you measure success and progress against your goals and make the right necessary tweaks throughout the entire journey and thinking about that. So, at Deloitte, we have a lot of different enablement areas and thinking about this. I mean, one that I think is really interesting, particularly in the time that we're in today of uncertainty, and a lot of retailers are really flying blind. They don't, last year's data, whether it be brick and mortar or digital, is just not that informative today. And so, we've really, cultivated a strong depth of consumer data and analytics of, understanding the behavior of consumers. Where are they shopping? How is share shifting across mass or home improvement as folks are home and looking to kind of spend, but not necessarily spend on the same things? And how is that coming? So we look at billions of little location data points and how people are moving or not moving, where they're spending, and then where and how is their sentiment to getting to move around, to shop, how are they going to shop, and how are they feeling about the economy? So, Insight IQ is Deloitte's platform for this. It's a really interesting platform to really get into the weeds of how consumers are thinking, and more importantly, how they're acting and behaving in the marketplace.
Yep. And the sentiment data and some of the global side is actually available just kind of for anyone, public consumption on Deloitte.com. So, I would say head over there, play around with it. Again, 13 different countries every 2 weeks, really getting a sense of how consumers are feeling in this instance. And we're going to continue it throughout the summer. So, if you don't feel like looking at it now, you can come back in a few months and hopefully give you a feel for where things have been and are heading. With that, I think, just wanted to give you guys a quick overview, and Debbie may have had a couple questions for us to dig into.
Yeah, absolutely. So thanks again, Bobby and Chuck. Great information, great data and details. I just wanted to follow up with a couple of questions. The first one is, can you talk a little bit about any retailers who are succeeding with their digital commerce initiatives, and what do you attribute that to?
Yeah, so I'll take this one, Chuck. Feel free to pile on if you want. I think there's a couple of kind of types or categories of retailers who have been pretty successful. The first are those, honestly, who are somewhat lucky to have been trading in, staple items that help someone, run a household, that are now getting used a lot more than when people aren't home that often. So it's hard to say, that was a strategy per se, but going forward, you're seeing a lot of retailers add those types of items to their digital assortment that typically wouldn't do that. Or you're seeing, retailers kind of enter into the delivery space, the home delivery space, the curbside carryout space that hadn't before, drug retailers or, things like that. So I think that's one interesting thing, is just having the right stuff. The second really is agility, and it's probably an overused word, but folks that were able to very quickly bob and weave to things like contactless, cashless payments, curbside pickup, fulfilling out of stores, even if those stores happen to be closed, were really able to optimize or at least meet as much of the demand as possible. Those who couldn't, were really limited to what they had in the DC, and that was sort of it. And as that started getting lower, the supply chain was kind of messed up. We had some things locked in stores that we couldn't really get to. So, I think there was a little bit of that. And thirdly, those who were willing to partner. So, you saw the Instacarts and DoorDashes of the world continue to, expand into new categories, to have sort of wait lists for their slots. The overall kind of food supply chain last mile piece to consumers, both for restaurant and, prepared foods, but also fresh and grocery type items. There was a really big kind of increase there. And I think we saw those who could plug into all of the different avenues to get that to consumers at a, convenient and reliable way. Those were ones that succeeded.
Yeah, great insights, especially the last one about the partnerships, and it's really going to be key probably moving forward. The first two, though, so having maybe a different selection of products than you're used to, or adding products, and also being able to be agile and add new technologies. Given the state of the economy and unemployment right now, and other financial challenges that retailers are dealing with, how do you suggest they prioritize these kinds of digital commerce initiatives when they are dealing with, other kinds of challenges, specifically financial?
Yeah, I can definitely take that. I think overall it's around kind of placing the bets where you think you're going to have the best success, and understanding your consumer and investing in ways that, can meet them where they are. The behaviors that we're seeing overall are not they are not going to just automatically disappear. I think consumers, while it remains to be seen at what degree, will have increased digital penetration. And they will get used to that overall. I think the key here is to make sure that you're placing the bets with the consumers and providing the convenience and meeting the needs, and also leveraging the ecosystem. Acknowledging that there are a number of opportunities to make investments in platforms as a pay-as-you-go service while you're building up the capabilities and proving out the marketplace exists for your products with your consumers. So I think that taking advantage of this opportunity to engage with consumers in the way that they are now doing so is extremely important, and it's going to be a long-term benefit. So any investments now would likely pay off.
Right, just got to take the leap and make the investments, right?
Yeah. One other place that I'd see, as investment required or as a place to play, there's typically e-commerce and digital indexes a little higher income in certain cases, because there's extra costs associated with it. There's access. There's things that are not always available to all consumer groups. But I think as we move forward, offering that sort of digital to store mix, whether that be the buy online, pick up in store, or fulfill it, free from your local store, aspects that sort of partial digital, but take advantage of the existing kind of ecosystem, the existing comfort level with consumers interacting with certain brands, while showing a value proposition that there's not a lot of extra costs here incorporated with it. So if you can give convenience for little to no extra dollars, I think you'll see all consumers sort of engaging with that.
All right, terrific. Yep, that makes a lot of sense. So it's definitely been a strange year for all of us, and we're headed into the summer, and this is the time of year when retailers are typically planning their holiday strategies. Mm-hmm. What kind of predictions do you have for this year's holiday season, and any advice for retailers?
Yeah, I used to like to make predictions. I think it's a bad idea these days. So what I can say is a couple of things. First, I think there will be a lot of uncertainty. And I think what that will actually play itself out in is a couple things. One, usually during the holidays, digital index is higher. Gift giving, sending people things when you're not going to be there, or just having to put a bunch of presents in the back of your car when you drive to grandma's house. They're already at grandma's house, whatever it might be. That I think that has happened in previous years, and I don't see any indication why that wouldn't be the case again this year. Higher indexing towards digital, especially mobile, will be something that I think we'll see again this year. Secondly, I do think we might see some replacement of what I would call the person as the gift, right? Me traveling to go see somebody. or us getting together at a restaurant, or all those things that I just don't think as many people will be comfortable with that this holiday season as used to be. So I think people may replace that sort of in-person with virtual well wishes and virtual greetings. Some of those will be paid, gifts, gift cards, cameo videos from your favorite D-list celebrity, whatever that might be. But some will just be, using technology like we're using right now to connect. But I do think we will see an increased usage of sort of digital methods of showing, your appreciation over the holidays for your friends, families, and coworkers. So I just think all things point to a higher index towards digital, paid and or not paid, this coming holiday season based upon, sentiment. And I actually think the other holiday season that we have coming up with back to school will be a good read on that, because I think people don't quite know what school looks like yet, so they don't quite know what spend will look like. Deloitte does a report on both of those based on consumer responses. So in early July, we'll have a back to school report, and in early October, we'll have a holiday sort of preview. So we'll see what those say, and I'll let them do some of the predictions with all that data. Okay.
Chuck, did you want to add anything?
No, I think Bobby said it well. I think, you got to look to the data to figure out where the trends are pointing. And, right now we're in this area of uncertainty. And so as things progress, I think monitoring spend and monitoring consumer behavior, not just intent, will be extremely important as you set that up for success.
Yeah, I feel like in some ways people are spending less on travel and entertainment, and so they might spend more on holiday gifts. But in other ways, where everyone is also, or a lot of people are still very challenged financially. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. And you're right, back to school is going to be crazy because we just don't know if it's going to be 100% virtual school or some kind of hybrid, and what items people are going to need or want to buy. It'll be fascinating. Yeah,
I think a very astute point there that says people will save on things that they typically do around the holidays: travel, socializing. Those are usually and continue to be growing categories each year. Likely won't spend as much. Will they put that money back in their pocket, or will they use it to replace those in-person experiences with some sort of token of appreciation? It's hard to say.
Right.
And micro markets will emerge in terms of how different regions respond in different ways, either for school or, in terms of the state's response to how they want to react to the virus. And, that will create, very different experiences for very different individuals.
That's a great point.
Even more challenges for retailers who, especially those who, have stores all around the country, because they're going to be dealing with real, micro markets and interesting challenges ahead. So, well,
absolutely.
Thanks to both of you for taking the time to talk through all of this today. It's, I think it's been really helpful, great insights, and, we really appreciate it. And I just want to wrap up and thank the audience as well, and just be on the lookout for more Retail Reset content coming your way.